Right now, though, John Rentoul is here, chief political commentator at The Independent. John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I thought you're the perfect man to look back on this week of Labour government, the spending review. Keir Starmer's interviewing the New Statesman, you know, more sort of lies being told by members of the government, or at least people accusing them of telling untruths about various things.
I'm glad you corrected yourself there, Mike.
Well, they are telling lies. I mean, Keir Starmer said that he collected the money from the VAT on private schools to put to the housing budget, which, in fact, Rachel Reeves completely and utterly contradicted the previous day.
Yeah, no, that was a foolish.
So that one is a lie. I mean, why would he do that? I mean, surely there should be somebody now asking questions about who's actually controlling his Twitter account, because it gets more ridiculous by the day.
Well, I think he's making the broader point that the critics of the government, and that includes Kemi Badenoch this morning, saying she wants to scrap the oil and gas levy. They always come up with these criticisms, but they never say how they're going to pay for it.
Well, that's the problem. But you know, she said in fact, I can play you the clip. She said exactly what they did with the VAT that they collected. Have a look at this.
That is why at the budget last autumn, I ended the tax loophole which exempted private schools from VAT and business rates. And I put that money where it belongs, into helping the 93% of children in our state schools.
So that's basically her saying, well, we've done it. Well, they said they were going to hire 6,500 teachers. They said it was going to be putting money into the state system, which they wanted to do because they were taking money off the toffs, who can afford to send their kids to rich and expensive schools. So why would he bother putting out a tweet to say, this is why we've been able to build some more houses? Well,
because, as I say, he was just making a general point. And, you know, there's no hypothecation in the tax system. I mean, that money... There isn't a sort of limited amount of money which you could follow and say that pound that came from VAT on school fees has gone to this school here.
Well, no, but that's what she said.
It all goes into the general pot, and you know what the point that the Prime Minister was making, the perfectly reasonable one, which is they've raised taxes and they've increased spending on public services generally.
Well, they have, yeah, but when the Chancellor of the Exchequer I'm just trying to make the point of again, it's the kind of the disconnection going on. If the Chancellor of the Exchequer makes a point in the spending review that this is what's happened to the money, we put it back into the school system, we put it into the education system, then why tweet that something else has happened to it? And I know what you're saying, I understand that, but the impression given is that he's saying that money's now helping to build more houses, which it isn't.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's a communications mess up.
It is, but don't you think? I mean, I don't know. You may not know. I don't know who runs his Twitter account, but I mean, there are a continuing series of statements that he makes on his Twitter account, which are clearly not true.
Well, I'm not sure that's right, Mike, but. It is a very strange account. It keeps on issuing these Labour slogans in a constant stream, and there's no real connection between them. And I think that's one of the criticisms that does stick to this government, is that it doesn't have a very consistent message.
I mean, well, let's just have a look. You know, this from yesterday. Keir Starmer: last autumn we fixed the foundations. This week we showed Britain we will rebuild. Well, you know, last autumn they didn't fix the foundations. Last autumn they had a budget which caused 275,000 people to lose their jobs.
Well, no, it also raised taxes in order to pay for public services.
Yeah,
and to fill the hole left by the Conservative government.
Well, so, yes, you can say that, but they didn't fix any foundations, did they?
No, they filled a hole that was left to them by the Conservative government.
Which the OBR has said wasn't actually a £22 billion black hole at all. So they keep.
No, it's bigger than that, actually, Mike, because they ended up putting up.
Yeah, but it's not as big as it is now.
No, it was. I mean, no. The point is, they put up taxes by 25 billion in order to spend more on public services,
yes.
And that was what the people voted for in the general election.
But they've also borrowed an awful lot of money, John. So the black hole surely is getting bigger. It's not getting smaller, is it? They borrowed 20 billion in April alone.
Yeah, well, the borrowing figures are alarming, and she's going to have to put taxes up again in the autumn, which I think is going to upset a lot of people.
Well, exactly right, because it's also going to upset Rachel Reeves, isn't it? I mean, we've had conversations with you about this before, and I think you've now come around to the idea that she might not last. Have you? Or have you frozen? Has John Rentoul frozen? I'm sure John Rentoul's frozen. We'll come back to John Rentoul in a minute. Yeah, I mean, here's the problem with Rachel Reeves and her continuing belief that actually everything seems to be going terribly swimmingly. I think he's back. John, are you back?
I'm back. Yes.
Sorry, you seem to freeze.
I didn't freeze. You froze, Mike.
Oh, I froze. Oh, okay. I didn't realise I was frozen because I was still moving and talking. Did you hear the question?
So was I.
The question was, I think you might be coming around to the idea that Rachel Reeves is not long for this world. Is she?
No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's right. Actually, I don't know who would replace her.
Well, I'm not sure who would replace her either, but you know, she's not doing a very good job, is she? I mean, generally speaking, she's not particularly well liked in her own party at this point, is she?
Well, I thought what was interesting about the spending review was that she did appear to be pleading with Labour MPs in particular to give her a break and to support her, because you're absolutely right. She's incredibly unpopular in the country, and what was fascinating about there was a survey of Labour Party members at the end of last month, which suggested that she was bottom of the league table of cabinet ministers in popularity.
Yes.
Absolutely extraordinary to have your Chancellor at the bottom of the list. But, I mean, Keir Starmer was well down on that list as well. I mean, the government as a whole is unpopular and in trouble. And I think she tried to sort of pull some of that back in the spending review. And I think, judging by the response from some Labour MPs, she half succeeded. I mean, I think she made a reasonable fist of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she made a reasonable fist of it, but nobody believes the numbers. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the numbers have all been sort of cooked up and messed around with, and she's using some old Tory numbers, some she does like, some she doesn't like, and the numbers just don't really add up, unfortunately.
They really don't, and that's why taxes are going to have to go up in the autumn, and that's the one thing that she and Keir Starmer will not say. I mean, she had some very strange form of words, which is, that there's nothing in the spending review that requires taxes to rise in the autumn, but there's plenty outside the spending review that means the public finances are in a far worse state than they were in just March.
Well, exactly right. So the economy is not going well. I mean, only yesterday we learned that the GDP was dropped down 0.3%. So she's not growing the economy, even though they said that they could pay back the pensioners' fuel allowance because now the economy is doing better than it was, when it actually isn't.
Now, there I would agree with you, Mike. That was a statement which was flatly untrue.
Yeah.
I mean, the argument that they ought to be making is that they've managed to fix the hole that was left to them by the Tories. They realised that they went a bit too far on their winter fuel payment, and that was a mistake. And so they're going to reverse it, but they still haven't said how they're going to pay for that. So
no. But they haven't. But they won't admit it's a mistake, and that's part of the problem. Why don't they just say it was a mistake?
They ought to just say, sorry, we got it wrong.
Yeah, but they won't say that, instead of which, and she sort of hamstrung herself now by saying, oh no, we were able to do it now because we fixed the foundations and fixed the economy. And we've got, for example, Jonathan Reynolds claiming today that there's a trade deal imminent with the US. Well, for weeks we've been told they've already got a trade deal with the US, so either they have one or they haven't, surely.
No, well, it hasn't. No, they've signed the general principles, so they haven't. It hasn't been implemented, and that's what he was talking about.
Well, there's no detail because they haven't actually got a deal yet.
No, they've got no. Well, it depends what you mean by a deal. They've agreed the terms of the deal. It hasn't actually been implemented yet, and they haven't agreed.
Well, they're still arguing about steel, aren't they? They're still arguing about the tariffs on steel, and they're still arguing about the tariffs on cars, because I'm told that the tariffs on steel are still there, and the tariffs on cars.
Well, they are still there, but the Americans
so they haven't got a deal.
To lift them. No, but the agreement has been reached. It's just a question of implementing.
Right. But that's like saying I've bought a house, but all you've actually done is agreed to buy a house, but you haven't actually bought it yet.
Well, it's like the different. Yes, it's like exchange and completion, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's a lot of things that can happen in between, and sometimes you don't end up completing, so you haven't actually bought a house until you bought it.
Well, that is absolutely true.
I mean, you can't really argue with that. I mean, the other one is the Chagos Islands. Every single time he gets up to speak about it, Keir Starmer says China's very much against this agreement and against this deal, when China actually came out and said we welcome it.
Yeah, I think he's trolling you, Mike.
I think he is.
I think he's trying to wind up the opposition because he deliberately mentions China every time.
Yeah,
even though
but it's wrong. But it's wrong, though. Don't you think the Prime Minister ought to have a slightly better grasp of reality?
No, I think what he's saying is that the deal we have done it stops China's interest in expanding its influence in the area, and therefore whatever they say in public, they don't really like it.
No, but his words are they're against the deal. He doesn't
well,
say.
I think they have formally opposed it. I mean,
No, they haven't. No, they actually came out and said they welcomed it. They've actually physically said that. You can argue that they didn't say that in private, but the point is, he says Russia are against it, China are against it, Reform are against it. You know, that's what he says, but it's wrong.
Well, he's extrapolating. He's interpreting what the Chinese really mean.
Or you could call it lying. Steve has sent me a tweet, which I'm going to read to you. He says, "Can you please ask John Rentoul if he thinks it's great that the Mauritians now have zero income tax at the expense of the British public, and whether he feels we should support the rest of the world financially?"
Well, no, I think this is a terrible deal. I'm afraid I agree with you. I mean, I think there's an awful lot of hyperbole, and I think a lot of the figures that are bandied about are absolute nonsense. I mean, for Kemi Badenoch to talk about £30 billion is absolutely absurd. But I mean, because the truth is bad enough. We are paying £165 million a year for something 28 years or something. You know, of the first 28 years of a 100-year lease. It is appalling, but it's not £30 billion.
No, it's a terrible state of affairs. The other big story, of course, this week was the new appointment of a new chairman for Reform, David Bull. I think we've got a clip here for you.
So when I was doing Most Haunted Live, which was it was the world's largest live ghost hunt, by the way, and we had all of these people watching, but when we came off air, some things happened that I cannot explain. So, for example, I was driving through a wood and it was pouring with rain, and I knew someone was in my car. So I stopped the car in the middle of the wood, got into the boot, opened the boot, couldn't find anywhere, got back into the car, drove really fast to the hotel. Derek Okora, who was the paranormal medium at that time, came up to me in the bar and said, "You didn't come here on your own, did you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Your grandmother is with you." So I was like, OK. And then he changed facially. He started to channel her, that's what he said. And then he jumped on me and tried to strangle me. And I'm not kidding, I had bouncers in those days, and they pulled the bouncers off me. And then I went to bed. The next day I said, would you like to explain why you tried to kill me overnight? And he said, well, when I was talking to your grandmother, it was then hijacked by another evil spirit.
So it's going to be an interesting year, isn't it?
That is the most extraordinary clip. I've been interviewed by David Bull several times.
Yeah. He's a very popular talk host. In fact, he's not doing it anymore. People are really upset that he's not going to be doing it anymore.
No, that's right. I mean, in many ways, he's a much better fit for that job than Zia Yusuf, because he's much more sort of outgoing and cheerful and.
And funnily enough, I mean, I've been talking to some Reform people about it, and none of them, I mean, unlike most political parties where they go, crikey, why is he talking about ghosts on national television? But he did manage to sort of completely confound Susanna Reid, who really didn't know what to say, because she'd been sort of giving him quite a hard interview up until that moment, and she kind of lost it. She was like, I don't know what to do now. But they're quite happy with it, because it makes him look like quite an interesting character.
Well, that's one word. That's one word for it, Mike. I mean...
Well, yeah, but not because one of the reasons that people have fallen out of love with politics is because they see these kind of automaton-like figures who don't appear to be very human and don't appear to have anything interesting to say. And I think that's part of their disenchantment with them.
Well, OK, David Bull is certainly human, and he has interesting, if wacky things to say.
All right, we should leave it at that. Thank you very much indeed. John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator at The Independent.